Hi everybody, so I'm here and I'm going to speak and share with you about emancipation, and we're going to talk a bit about racial segregation. And we know that, so for those who are not aware, Emancipation Month is coming up. In Canada, we celebrate emancipation. We do not celebrate, well, we do celebrate Juneteenth, and we know of Juneteenth, and we go to the US, we go to Buffalo, New York for the Juneteenth celebrations, and we have some Juneteenth celebrations that are happening here in Ontario specifically. But in Canada, we recognize emancipation. Emancipation is recognized for the month of August. So the month of August is declared as Emancipation Month here, and we have a lot of emancipation celebrations per cities. Different cities are having so many things that are happening. And as we are approaching emancipation, it's really important for us to understand that racism did exist here in Canada. Sometimes we are a bit overt. We don't want to. Well, Canadians, period. Sometimes don't want to acknowledge and admit that there was racism here. So I've done some notes, did some research, and I'm going to specifically speak about racial segregation, and I'm going to connect it back to the education system. So, racial segregation, there is specific laws here in Canada, specifically in Ontario, and specifically in Nova Scotia that existed. So, this wasn't just in some provinces, there were no laws that governed the people that allowed for racial segregation, but it still happened. But what I want us to connect to and what I want us to understand is that there were laws specifically here in the province that I live in, Ontario and Nova Scotia. When we talk about racial segregation in education, the people that had the decision makers and the people that had the power to implement racial segregation were people that worked in school boards. They were the trustees that continued to vote for racial segregation and wanted racial segregation to continue to happen throughout Ontario and Nova Scotia. Even the courthouse upheld, so I want to say that again, the Ontario Provincial Courthouse at one time actually upheld the laws to continue racial segregation here in Ontario. And that is important to note, as you can see the systems that were involved in racial segregation when it comes to the education system. So, racial segregation in the education system meant that black children, black people, period, were not allowed to attend the same schools as white people were allowed to attend. Okay, so basically, if you're from specific communities, the public schools that were in those communities, if you self-identified as a black person based on your race, okay, this is again anti-black racism. You were not permitted, based on the laws that governed the people at that time, you were not permitted to attend the school that was right next to your house. You had to attend an all-black school, or technically, you couldn't attend school. So I'm going to go a bit into my notes because we're reflecting on emancipation. And a part of reflecting on emancipation is knowing our history and knowing where we're coming from to really appreciate where we're going. So I'm going to pause there because I'm doing segments of the videos. Okay, everybody? So I'll come back.